what was your major for transfer?
My major was computer science.
Okay. What was your transfer GPA?
I think when I transferred, I think it was like 3.2. So I don't have the best GPA. But yeah.
Which schools did you apply, and like what were the results, and where did you end up going?
I applied to like all UCs, Cal Polys, Cal States. I think I got into 2 Cal States basically out of everything because of my GPA. I think I almost got into Santa Cruz, but based off 1 grade, they wouldn't let me in for CS basically. So I ended up going to Long Beach, which I was probably going to do anyways because Cal States are a lot cheaper. But yeah, so I think I got into 2 Cal States. I don't exactly remember. It's been
quite a while. Yeah. So what were the extracurricular activities you participated at IVC? And I noticed that you participated in quite a lot, which is ASEC and like 3D printing club. Like, could you share your insight on like the importance of being in leadership positions and like what you learned?
Yeah, of course. So Applied Science and Engineering Club, or ASEC, on IVC's campus. It's like the largest STEM club, at least it was when I was there a few years ago. And it was a great opportunity to like learn like engineering skills, to network with people. I made a lot of like really good friends there in college as well. I became friends with the board when I joined and like joined the engineering subgroup of 3D printing. And then the following year, I was technically the fundraising chair and the 3D printing chair. So I was running the 3D printing club that I previously was a part of, also helping out with other things that our faculty advisor needed, like with the prototyping workshop at the old offsite engineering campus at ATEP. And then now they have the new one that was built. And so I helped set up the new facility as well a little bit, and helped out with like the robotics side of things as well, because that was like another subgroup that kind of, I don't know if it's back, but it was kind of on hold for a little bit when I was on the board, because the faculty member that usually leads it, I believe, was taking a sabbatical. So or something along that line. But so basically really good leadership experience, I think, at IVC is available for STEM students because ASEC was open to everybody. I mean, we even had non-STEM students, like we had music majors and stuff that we would even like set up projects for. And every meeting, it was basically a project of some sort to teach you skills, whether it was soldering or, and we try to make it fun too, like soldering like Christmas trees for like little mini LED Christmas trees in order to like learn soldering. And then, you get to take it home and it's like this cool little thing to kind of remember. A lot of other really interesting things like that, even some more fun ones like egg tosses and stuff like that. I think, we did some more simple ones and some more complex ones, but altogether just try to get people together, network at school, get some experience in like a little bit of things, expose people to group projects like the 3D printing group and some other things like robotics. Also rockets, we would host a rocket event.
Oh, wow.
In which, people could basically come build rockets, and then we'd all go out to the desert one day and launch them off. So a lot of really cool, fun events. It's led by, or at least used to be led by Professor White. And then I believe that Naruzi I think she's the main faculty head now, but White's still advising. And then there's Professor McKim and Professor Appleman that used to also be a part of it. I believe McKim still is. I'm not sure about Appleman though. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good experiences at IVC. There's some other, I guess not necessarily extracurriculars. Do you want me to get into like my internship that I got through that as well?
Yeah, sure. Please share.
Okay, so one of the professors at IVC, he was a physics professor. Sorry,
Professor Sim?
Yeah, sorry, Professor Sim. Yeah. I don't know why I forgot that, but yeah, Professor Sim's awesome, and he had a Engineer 101 class that I believe Naruzi is teaching now, or at least she did for my class. So it was the first time she taught that. And basically, he picks students out of that class to participate in a NASA research internship over the summer.
Oh, wow.
So he picked me and I think like 11 or 12 students out of that class to participate in that. And I knew previous members of ASEC that were also in that as well. So we got to participate in that over the summer, which was a lot of fun. We got to work actually in the brand new ATEP facility, like before classes even started and such. So, we were building quadcopters and learning how to like do facial tracking with OpenCV cameras. And my team specifically, I was the lead of like the software team, I guess you could say. Like we were working on like machine learning stuff, made some simple algorithms to like cut up a high def image of Mars, circle detection craters, and then classify images gathered from Mars to determine like, am I looking at a crater? Am I not? And all of these things were kind of supposed to go together to help get an idea of how geolocationary like understanding could occur on Mars, because you don't have GPS or anything, so you have to have visual navigation. So it was a lot of cool things. It exposed me to a lot, and I think that was a really good thing to have on my resume at the time as well. But I technically was already working as a software engineer or a junior software engineer while I was in school as well.
Wow.
And I tackled both of those at the same time that summer as well. So it was pretty busy, but yeah.
Great. That's cool.
My extracurriculars.
You mentioned about the professors thing, but are there also other professors whom you connected at IVC, the most at IVC, and would recommend to other students? And like, how were you able to connect with them, and how did they help you down the line professionally?
Yeah, so Professor White is a really good example. Mm-hmm. I haven't necessarily reached out to her since then, other than to like support ASEC stuff. However, I know many people in ASEC refer to her for letters of rec for basically anything that they need, like whether it's like masters or whatnot. She's a really good recommendation in that sense. Mm-hmm. And she's like a staunch supporter. Like she's like the kind of person you want like to have your back kind of thing. She's a really good person in that regard. And then Professor McKim is probably the person I worked the most with. He ran the prototyping like workshop and several of the prototyping classes and like design classes. I learned a lot from him. He also was the faculty lead of the 3D printing group. So I basically worked directly under him, basically supplying his classes with like 3D printed prototypes that they designed and then that they could then like create molds of to like plastic casts, etc. So he's extremely knowledgeable. His classes are honestly really cool. I wish I could have taken them. It's just, I was always so packed with my schedule. But at least I got the exposure of working in the workshop with him. And I saw that he like really cared about those projects and the students really liked it. A lot of those students would basically take like every single class with him.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'd say he's a really good professor to take, especially if you want to learn like real hands-on skills for like how to make things with your hands. Yeah, it's a really good kind of class to take.
Thank you. What advice would you give like yourself at the beginning of the transfer process? Like what are some of the key insights you gained while applying for transfer that you would like to pass on to other students?
Yeah, so for transfer, there's really little that matters other than the classes you've taken and your grades. That's like almost the only thing that matters, which is unfortunate. However, once you get into university, like whether it's like a Cal State or a University of California, either way, like you end up on the same footing. So I would say that apply to schools, like personally from my experience at going to Long Beach, I didn't end up going to defense, but for anybody that wants to go into defense, I would highly recommend Long Beach because I know, like I was in an engineering fraternity, a professional engineering fraternity at Long Beach. Mm-hmm. And I believe like almost half of the fraternity is employed at Northrop, whether full-time positions or internships that was going on this past summer. So like, for example, companies like Northrop have a really, really, really good connection with schools like Long Beach. And so tons of students, even outside my fraternity, like tons of students that I knew that were engineers, mechanical engineer, computer engineering, computer science, they were all really capable of getting those jobs because of the school's connection. So I think that that's another good thing. Yeah, so I would take into account the school's connection with industry, especially the type of industry you want to get into. That can be a huge factor because, like, again, Northrop, for example, was on campus, it seemed like every week, maybe even twice a week. Whereas other companies might just be there for the job fair, that sort of thing. So stuff is important to know. Also think about extracurriculars. Like, for example, if you are transferring and you haven't had an internship, you haven't had any actual hands-on experience, I would highly recommend you go to a school that focuses on that. I'm not a big academic or theoretical fan. I've never had like a super big GPA, nothing like that. I'm more of like I want to actually get to work. That's why I was working as a software engineer concurrently. So I would highly recommend that you kind of find what suits you. If you want to get into theoretical and maybe if you're shooting for a master's, then absolutely go to a school that kind of suits that. But then you might want to go to like a Cal Poly if you, like, for example, want to get that more hands-on. I know that their programs are a lot more invested into that kind of curriculum. So take that into account. And I would say just cross your T's and dot your I's on basically everything that's required. Like I had IGETC. I basically satisfied all requirements to get into UCs just in case. So when I went to Long Beach, which was the Cal State, Long Beach's curriculum, I didn't necessarily need all the physics or all the calculus I took. So I took more classes, but it's okay because, I was trying to make myself I was trying to market myself as open as possible because I wanted to not limit my possibilities. So you can go that route, but it's more work in the sense of you can end up taking classes you don't need. But I think at the end of the day, increasing your chance of opportunity is always the best to do.
Great, thank you. Also, you mentioned something about working as a full-time software engineer while in community college. Like, how did you come across that opportunity, and then how did you got that? And then any tips and advice for community college students who also want to work or intern at a company?
Gotcha. So I basically got this job, I think it was my second or third year. I was in community college for 3 years. So I think it was like my second or third. Yeah. Essentially my aunt mentioned to me that she knew somebody that worked at a company that works on software in Irvine, and recommended me, basically gave me the company's info to apply. So I just sent my resume to an email basically. And looked a little bit up the company online. At the time, I didn't necessarily see much, but I knew that they basically made apps. It's a company that essentially made apps through contracts. So it's like other companies would come to us with an idea or they want this app for a business, et cetera. And then we build it. So I basically applied to them, got an interview. I ended up getting hired on spot.
Oh,
they
wow.
liked me. Yeah. I really liked everybody there. That was an awesome company. So it was a good experience where I started as an intern, and I think it took me, within 9 months, I was working part-time. And after 9 months, they hired me on as a junior engineer.
Oh, wow.
And then, so they hired me on as a junior engineer, which I guess my title was technically just software engineer, but I was basically kind of like a junior engineer. And so after, I think 3 years, I ended up working full time for them for most of the last 2. And after I transferred in everything, and then I ended up receiving my offer from Amazon, and they gave their offer as well. But I ended up choosing the Amazon offer just to kind of, get out of state a little bit, see more of the world and that sort of thing. But I made sure to keep really good network with them. They really wanted me. The second I told them, they had an offer, a counter offer for me before I left the building that day. So when I originally got the Amazon offer, I let them know that's professional courtesy. You don't just ditch a company. Never do that. Always keep your professional relationships open as well as you can. And so, yeah, I let them know, and immediately, like my immediate bosses, like the VP of production and like the development lead, were both immediately like kind of sad, but they immediately got an offer for me, and honestly, it was more than I expected. You know, I started as an intern, so you don't make a whole lot of money necessarily, especially small business. I was not making much, but the skills that I learned were like, I basically, the skills you learn in school are basically nothing. You learn like the fundamentals of some stuff, but working is a completely different ballgame. And yeah, so I basically got an offer before I even left. I ended up going with Amazon anyways, but it just kind of goes to show that, you know, you build your professional relationships and they can benefit you. Like, even if you end up leaving, et cetera, I know that I could potentially always go back and kind of like hit them up, see if they're interested in having me back. My boss at the time literally said that I can basically text him if Amazon doesn't work out and they'll bring me back. So
Wow.
you want to build those kind of relationships, because after school's gone, like once you're out of school, you're on your own. The school's not going to like set you up with a job fair. You know, those kinds of things don't really happen. So once you graduate, you want to make sure that you at least have some sort of network, whether it's other students that can hook you up with referrals and whatnot. But knowing people is the number one name in the game.
Thank you. Could you talk about like what you do at Amazon, or if it's not confidential, like what are the tips and advice for like students who want to pursue like software engineering and those like big companies and stuff like that?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I would say is I wouldn't start at a big company. I would recommend that you go to like a small company first, especially like in Irvine. Students at IVC are in like one of the best locations. Like there's almost no excuse to not have an internship. It's super easy. You can just apply to all those companies in the area for biomed, any engineering at all. Like there's a company regardless of your major. So I think it's really easy or a lot easier to get a internship at small companies, and they're usually better internships, because at big companies, they'll usually have you work on like a project, like, oh, like build this feature for a website, and like 3 months later you show it off. That can be good. But at a internship at a small company, it's like you're going to be playing every hat. So like you're going to wear all these different hats. You're going to be working on front and back end, more likely to work with like relevant technologies. Like I was working with React Native and JavaScript and Swift and more updated technologies. I did also work on like outdated stuff too, and most of it was like updating, which might not have necessarily been useful for me. But overall, I learned so much more than I feel like if I was at a big company where I was more locked into like one project. I had my hand in several, like probably a dozen or so different apps, different technologies. So it was a really good experience for that. And I feel like a lot of small businesses have that sort of mentality where it's easier, quicker to prototype, develop, and expose yourself to different tech, which is one of the most important things, especially for software engineers. And so at Amazon specifically, what I do is I work for the supply chain optimization technology organization. Yeah, so I'm still kind of new. I'm on like my 3rd month right now. I'm in like a team that specifically works on some internal tools that are used to basically like optimize. So everything's kind of about like optimization for the most part. So, you know, like saving money by like, so I'm in specifically forecasting. So we're trying to basically like create tools that predict how to optimize, you know, supply chain technologies in order to save money and make things more efficient and productive, et cetera. So there's like data scientists and machine learning people that will deal with things, and then a lot of software or development engineers, which will actually like implement things. And Amazon specifically is, I think, really nice. I didn't necessarily know a whole lot about their development culture before I joined compared to like others. But I think that it really suits me because I like the responsibility of being on a project. Like right now, I'm basically the technical product owner of a project. And in a way at Amazon, everybody's a product owner to a degree. Like you're all responsible. You all own your work. Like everybody is everybody's like part of a project that you work on basically. So it's like at a company like Amazon, thankfully, it's not like some other big tech companies where you're kind of locked into like one technology stack and you're working on like a huge code base that is never going to be reworked. You're just working on like one little part in Java or something like that. But so far at Amazon, I've had the opportunity to basically like redo an older project, like update it into new technology, implement new features. I'm writing design documents to actually like come up with new ways of approaching different features. In my opinion, it feels very similar to a small business in that aspect because there's a lot of autonomy with teams. So I can't speak to necessarily like big companies like Google, Facebook. I know they all work different, but at Amazon at least there's a lot of autonomy. So each product team is responsible for their product, but then there's a lot of collaboration. So it seems like basically it's kind of like each team's like a small business with the benefits and the resources like a big business. If that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I noticed that can I assume like you didn't take every single classes for each of the skills you accumulated? Like if so, like how did you go around learning those learning those skills like from the technical skills? Is it on like online resources or like how did you develop them?
Well, it depends. So I have a lot of experience in like hardware stuff too. Because I guess this kind of goes into some of the other questions of what I would kind of recommend students to do before they're transferring, or rather just right now in community colleges, I would work on projects. I worked on a lot of hardware projects where I was working with like Arduino and trinkets, so like little robotic stuff and things like that. Engineering 100, for example, is a class that kind of deals with that. Me personally, with programming skills and a lot of these technical skills is just me learning it. I find that just going online and finding information, like some of the best software engineers I've ever met are not software engineers, like are not computer scientists. Like I think at my previous company, our best main backend guy was an automotive engineer. And the way that my boss at the time explained why he was so good, it's because when you're making a car, like everything has to work. Like there can't be anything that goes wrong. And so when you adapt that mentality to like a backend with software, you build really strong backend software where, you actually think about every single case where nothing kind of gets by your main goal of like, this has to be complete, working, and sustainable. Like it can't break down in 100,000 miles, can't break down, in a year when the tech changes a little bit. So, it's also a little bit of mentality when you're going into it. Like classes and stuff like that aren't going to kind of address everything that you need to know. It's only going to teach you like what data structures are, what algorithms are. You'll basically like that will be kind of irrelevant. It'll basically be fundamental knowledge once you actually get into the working world. So I think that really good projects to work on to build good skills is like look up the latest technology. Like everybody right now should be learning. Like if they want to be software engineers, for example, they should be learning JavaScript. They should know Java. C++ is what I started in because I actually went to Saddleback for C++ and took their computer science courses because their curriculum is really, really good for software engineering, or at least computer science. Whereas IVC's is a little bit split up. It's almost like relearning the fundamentals in every different language rather than what Saddleback does where they go from you learn basically what computer science is in general, like what even is programming, all the way to data structures and algorithms in C++ within 4 classes. And so it's kind of a brutal course, but I think that kind of handed in the fundamentals because it's C++ as well. So, you start with the really low level, understand that, and then, you can hop into JavaScript and you understand what's going on behind the scenes. But it's much more relevant technology where you can build websites, apps, like half the world practically runs on it at this point. A lot more frameworks that you need to get exposed to as well in languages like JavaScript. Python's good to know as well, but that's more for, in my experience, it's more for like scripting or running processes that aren't necessarily like a product, whereas something like JavaScript will run a website, etc. So I would say that looking up online how to do things is probably the best way to learn skills. That's how I mostly did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would highly recommend not to watch videos. At least for me, I love videos and like learning in a lot of different ways. But for me with programming, I feel like finding a well-written like article on like medium.com or something explaining something, you can get like an exact detailed answer on like how to do something with the code and everything. I feel like with videos, it's a little hard to follow. You're like copying things down when instead you can read it, understand the whole line at once, copy it in, that sort of thing. So I think that that's a good way of finding skills. Also, another one is surround yourself with people that are just better than you at anything. Like most of my best friends, I think, or my closest friends are people that I just admire because they can do things that I can't. Whether they're artists or like one of my best friends, a computer engineer who knows the like low level stuff better than I ever could. And I can even like, I can sometimes understand a little bit of what he's saying, but like, you know, it kind of inspires you when you're around people that do better than you in the sense of it's like, oh, like, wow, like I want to kind of learn that too. And you can kind of sponge information off and it kind of a snowball effect of kind of skills, which in my case, I don't like to be the best in one thing. I like to be good at everything, but I don't need to be the best in one specific thing. So for me, I just like to know a lot about everything. So yeah, I guess that kind of curiosity can help.
That's cool. So you talk about like online like media and stuff like that. Is there any like particular online platforms that you use or like any books that you like that's like really helped you out that you would like to recommend?
As for books, I've never read a software book in my life. It's actually a funny joke that just came up in like a stand-up like a week ago. Some of the new engineers are like, who reads books? Like software books. I don't know. If you learn, like find whatever the best way of learning for you is, and that will help. For me, I can't read a software book. I just use it for it. I tried to when I was a kid when I really wanted to learn programming, and I had no self-discipline in that manner. That works for you, go ahead. I like a just quick Google search. Like if I'm going to be like, you know, if I'm going to make a website and I know nothing, I'm going to say, okay, what's the best way to make, like, what's the best technology to make a website on? And it's like, okay, it might be like, I don't know, you might get like a WordPress recommendation, but it's like, okay, no, I want something a little bit more in depth. And it's like, okay, so like JavaScript, but what framework? Or am I going to use like Angular, React, Vue, or like, you know, all these different things. And then you look into like, what's the most prominent, what's the most recommended? React. And so you go learn React, learn the most relevant, you know, once you get the Hello World website up, and you follow a little tutorial, which you could literally do in like, you know, 10, 20 minutes nowadays with just a quick little article.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden be like, okay, how do I make like a sliding gallery of images or something? Literally just Google that. There's another article probably on the same website, like something like medium.com comes to the top of my mind right now. They have a lot of different articles. Ray Wenderlich's really good for a lot of things. A mix between, I think I've used him a lot for like little machine learning stuff and like OpenCV. But I think there's also software engineering stuff on there, or more like website and stuff like that. I don't think of a lot off the top of my head. I usually just do a Google search and like whatever comes up, I'll just sort through those answers. There's almost always somebody that has an exact explanation of what you're going to do. And then once you know, kind of understand how those features work, then it helps. Another way is also, you know, if you're at work, ask someone who's more senior than you. Like asking questions is probably the most important part of work. Yeah. Just make sure that you've approached the problem first so that you can kind of explain to someone like, hey, I have to do X. I've tried Y and maybe even Z. Do you have a suggestion on how I could accomplish this? And they're going to go, oh yeah, like this solution is actually the right way to go about it. Keep going down that path. Or they could be like, oh no, I see where you're going with these, but it's actually this way. And so it's better than like an open-ended question of just, you know, how do I do this thing? You always want to at least take an attempt and like an initiative on trying.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thank you. So you kind of talked about your personal projects you did, like which is it's in the bartender robot or something. Like I read about it on your LinkedIn. Like there are like three of them. Like did you do it while in IBC or like in college, or like could you talk about like the challenges you face, and like how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So I should probably like date those if they're not dated. But essentially, do you want me to start with the bartender one specifically, or do you mean just like most of my like key
Like
projects?
most of your like key projects that you want to share.
Okay. So I guess just chronologically, I used to make a lot of like games when I was younger, and like modding games is kind of what got me into programming. So I think that's always a good way to kind of like learn things, or at
Mm-hmm.
least kind of gain interest. Um, so when I was first programming, like I messed around with like Unity and things like that. And then eventually I did more hardware stuff at IBC. I participated in the HTCC research conference at UCI
Wow.
with ASEC members. They introduced me the first time to it. I worked with them a little bit on like a 3D printed prototype of like a shower head that would track water consumption back when like the drought was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something I worked on. It's like a big group. I didn't have like a huge input or anything, but it was fun and interesting to get exposed to like learning the skills at least at the time. So I got to learn like SolidWorks and things like that. Like I'm really good with CAD software. Whereas most software engineers, I guess, don't really get exposed to that, but I really like being cross-disciplined. So I got exposed to that, which got me into 3D printing later on, et cetera. So projects are better than just the outcome, but the skills you learn and like the people. So I also worked on a helmet concussion sensor that would basically like, it was a prototype for the same HTCC research conference, but the next year with a different group. And this one I like spearheaded the software development and all that. Basically like the engineering behind it. We used like accelerometer, gyroscope, basically a couple different sensors. I don't even necessarily remember. It's been several years, but basically we're using it to calculate impulse to detect if a concussion could have possibly been occurred. Because it's hard to say. Like even if it's the correct impulse or momentum, etc., you technically can't like legally just tell someone, oh, you got a concussion. So like there was a little bit of understanding going into it. The whole idea was to feed it into an app so that like, let's say you're biking or whatnot and you fall off your bike, the app could basically like pop up a notification, be like, hey, like you sustained like a potential like head trauma from that fall. And so that was kind of fun. I think I used a trinket for that and like several different sensors and whatnot. So I got to learn that. I basically didn't really know much of Arduino or anything like that beforehand. So I got to learn that, and then circuitry and stuff like that I had to kind of dive into. And then after that, part of the Engineering 100 project, I had another hardware thing, which was I don't know if they still do this, but it's basically like the robot you make to get out of the maze.
Oh.
Yeah, so I ended up doing that. That was really fun for me. That was one of the things that kind of sparked my interest in robotics. I think that Engineering 100 was like my favorite class in all of college. Um, wasn't hard, but it was like I actually learned something every day, which was awesome. Um, so things like that I think are really cool when you can actually like see your work being used, like, or like existing. Like there's something interesting about that hardware aspect. And so I did that. I then had several different little projects here and there. I always have like projects that I don't necessarily finish because I procrastinate and I change interests like a lot. So, I pick up like little skills along the way, and then I'm like, oh, this idea is actually cooler. And then I switch to that. Anyways, I ended up transferring, and then I started doing a lot more like software projects and trying them. So like my senior project and a couple class projects that I made like as well as I could and used my skills from school, from work as well. So like I made a few apps while I was there. One was like kind of like a social media, like drink tracking, social media thing where you go out and like, you know, take photos of yourself while taking shots throughout the night, and it would like plot where you were, and it'd be like a bar hopping app. So that the next day you could kind of like see your journey and how much like you drank and where you were, and, you know, all this kind of fun stuff. And it would try to like calculate your BAC based off like some simple values to, you know, kind of be like, hey, like you should get an Uber, you know, at the end of the night, that kind of thing. So just kind of stuff like that. My senior project was a app that basically it was like a political education app to try to, Siri thought I was talking here. So it's basically a political education app in which it was trying to bring publicly accessible information to directly, like easily accessible through one app, rather than going to like government websites and sorting through databases and filtering all that stuff. So basically like any information on political subject topic, like what is the Supreme Court, what are electors, you know, who is the president of the United States, like all those kinds of things, easily accessible. We were basically collecting data where you could vote on like issues, like maybe propositions, you could vote early, see the demographic breakdown of everybody else that's voting. So a lot of, basically we wanted to mess with like big data in a sense. So we made this to track everybody anonymously. Then you could kind of see, based off how you voted on issues, you could kind of see other people's breakdowns, like as a whole. And you could be like, oh, maybe, you know, I was supposed to be politically aligned in this way, but my choice, I'm actually fitting into the opposite group. That's kind of weird. And then it might show people that things aren't as polar opposites as they think.
Oh, wow.
And so it was kind of to give you that perspective of instead of like left versus right, or you know, like polar opposites fighting, that you can have an understanding of where you are politically, like yourself, etc. That was kind of the goal of it. It came out pretty well. Yeah, I was really proud of that one. It was a lot of fun. And then I also had some other small projects during, like a few other ones, including like the bartending one. That one was pretty fun. I mostly just kind of mentored the other people that were working on it, like the software side. I mentored them and like kind of helped them originally get this software. I think they ended up going with some open source software that they found for like a similar like bartending Raspberry Pi based robot.
Oh, wow.
And so they used that, and then I kind of helped them like apply it to ours and get it working, and like taught them the technology, etc. And then the rest of the team, like, or we had like another half of the team that built like the hardware side of it. And that was like an engineering project for my professional engineering fraternity. Like for our initiation, like part of our pledging process, we basically had to come up with a engineering project and see it through to the end. And so like, you know, we all came up with ideas, we voted, and that was kind of the fun, kind of simple one. So we kind of went with it because not a lot of people had a lot of experience, and it seemed like something everybody's interested in. So it was a pretty cool little project. It had been done before, but it was fun.
Cool. Those sounds really cool. It's impressive. So which of these skills like would the community college students be developing like right now, before transferring to improve future career aspects or improve chances on landing internships? I know you covered a lot, like on like searching on Google and like reading through stuff like that. But like, is there anything like more fundamental to like CS major of like yeah?
Okay, I think that the fundamentals really is that you just have to do things. You can learn as much as you want in school, but you're really not going to understand how anything works. Like basically school doesn't make you somebody who can then generate profit, like generate something that creates money. All it does is it satisfies a list of requirements that companies kind of expect. So once you like, I would just recommend that people get internships, because once you work on a project, like a real project, you start to realize that it's like, oh, you know, I might be able to like slack off on this assignment, or, you know, I might be able to, you know, skate by here, skate by there. But when it comes to like an actual product, it's like this thing's real. Other people are expecting things to be done on it. So I feel like naturally people are kind of required to take it more seriously. And so because of that, it's like a subliminal thing in your mind where you're more attentive to it. At least it is for me. And so that made me like really understand what I was doing even more so than like something in school. So again, I'm not a very academic person. You know, I forget. I feel like I would, you know, I'm the kind of person where once I'm out of a class, it's like that's gone. But with actual like work experience, it's much different. I feel that the knowledge and the time I spend into it, I get significantly more out of it than something like school. So I would just recommend that if you're the kind of person that can do a personal project and you're that disciplined, do it. If you're not necessarily that disciplined, get a group of people and hold each other accountable. That's, I think, the easiest way to do it. Group projects are really good, especially with like-minded people. Like assigned group projects obviously aren't great, but when it's, you know, people that want to work on something together and want to accomplish a goal, I think that can really help. Yeah, so I really think that it's just doing things that are going to actually allow you to gain the skills necessary. Just got to work on projects. And CS majors, software engineers, etc. We're the luckiest engineers because it takes literally $0 to basic, like you can basically become a extremely good programmer for free. Like there's no equipment, there's nothing involved. All like literally everything's available online. There's nothing stopping you from becoming really, really skilled. Whereas, you know, if you're like a mechanical engineer, you might be able to do some theoretical stuff, but you can't necessarily solve, you know, some real world problems that arise when a machine breaks down because of a certain reason, or, you know, something actually needs to be engineered in a different way. You can't always account for that in like a theoretical sense. But CS majors, yeah, we have no excuse. We got to actually get that stuff done. And it took me a lot of time to really kind of nail that down.
Thank you. I think I covered a lot of the most critical questions, but on the final note, is there any like the most important lessons that you learned that you would like to share, or like any other general tips and advice, or like any other personal experience or anything?
Yeah, I would say that probably the most important thing for me is that I made a personal decision to basically, like, school was something that I wanted to get done, but the more important thing for me was I wanted experience.
Yeah.
And I think that as you talk to any students that have had internships, especially like third and fourth year students at like universities, especially even the ones that don't have internships or jobs yet will feel the same way. It's they're like, crap, like, you know, they're applying and they're realizing at that point. Again, school is like one stepping stone. And I personally say that prioritization should be more so on skills and experience over academics, but you have to do both. Like you can't just not do school, but you know, if your GPA is not great, that's fine. Just have the experience. And that's kind of the route that I went. And so far it's been really working out for me. It's non-traditional for sure, but I would say that it definitely works.
Okay, thank you so much. I will stop the recording.